Now, Deven Ghelani is founder of the Policy in Practice consultancy, which advises local councils. Can you tell me, Deven, in simple terms, what the changes in funding will mean and why they are happening? Good morning to you.
Yeah, sure. I'll start with why they're happening. So the Household Support Fund, which the Crisis and Resilience Fund is replacing, was essentially a short-term pot of funding where the priority was to get support out to families as quickly as possible. So councils had this money for 6 months, and actually getting support to children during the school holidays was reasonably well targeted, and it was a very fast way to get support to families in need. I think the reflection has been in introducing the Crisis and Resilience Fund is, while that was good, with 3 years of funding, could that support have been better targeted? Now, we did some work along with Trussell looking at whether or not the support could have been better targeted. And we think that it could have been. So I think there are a couple of groups of people, just for illustration, that I think are always, for example, single people. You see a lot of people without children who are also struggling. We also see kind of some larger families who struggle more than other families. And you can see all of this in the data of people who present to food banks. I think the really important point here, which I'm sure Lindsay would agree with me on, is the Crisis and Resilience Fund is there for immediate needs, so people who need support that week, and that support will still be available through the Crisis and Resilience Fund. But it's not sufficient to bridge gaps that exist in the social security system anyway. So if the social security system itself isn't adequate to keep our children fed during the school holidays, we need to tackle that, absolutely. But some of those families will be struggling more than others, and that's where the Crisis and Resilience Fund will still be able to come in.
We know, as you've just said, lots of families have relied on those vouchers to feed their kids during the long summer holidays. But is it really the council's responsibility or the government's responsibility to feed our kids?
Well, I mean, I guess the justification for food banks exists because they are there. They are in need. The fact that they exist at all says that there are families in need, and actually leaving children going hungry is really not something that we want to do as a society. The social security system itself, we're seeing a small bump in generosity this April as universal credit goes up by a little bit more than inflation, which should hopefully reduce some pressures. And we're also seeing the lifting of the two-child benefit cap, which again will hopefully lift some pressures, which means the support the council do have can be used to help those in acute need. I think there's one other really important point here, Mike, which is, sometimes, things like school vouchers, vouchers during the school holidays, they're a bit of a sticking plaster. They're there to stick over gaps in the social security system, as I've said. I think the direction of travel some councils that are going in, it sounds like including Medway, is about using this support to actually engage families so they get the support, the wider support they need, support to move into work, support to access all of the income they should be getting through the social security system in the first place, with billions that are going unclaimed. And, this type of support, tackling social isolation as well, so getting people out and about, this kind of support can be what really brings communities together more so than just, an automated voucher via text over a period of time. And it is about, again, making sure it's not just a sticking plaster, but it actually builds resilience in those families and in those communities. And hopefully that's the direction of travel Medway Council are going in.
Now, Deven, just help me with this, because there is some contradiction. Medway Council seem to be saying that the rules for the new fund mean they're not allowed to use the money on this from this new fund for free school meal vouchers, but the Department for Work and Pensions say different.
Yeah, so councils do have a lot of freedom, but the departmental guidance says that support needs to be targeted according to need. And I think there is a view that all support to all families who are reliant upon school meals don't necessarily need that support directly. That's how a lot of councils are interpreting that. And actually, just to go to the practitioner level, it's less about interpretation. It's more about what practitioners are telling us. And what they're saying is that, ultimately, if they'd had that support, if they'd had the household support fund for longer, if they didn't have to spend it all within 6 months, they would have liked to have been more targeted. They would have liked to have been more thoughtful. So I think that's what you're seeing as practitioners themselves saying, now that we've got now we've got the support confirmed for a bit longer, we're asking ourselves, can we be more targeted? And 2 things I'd say to your listeners. One, support is still available. So firstly, whichever council you live in, Medway, Kent, anywhere across Kent, go to your council website and search for the Crisis and Resilience Fund. and all of your listeners across the country as well. That support is still there. And the second point I'd say is that councils can still be proactive in reaching families. That's some of the work that we help councils with. We do some work with Medway as well. So, but it can be better targeted. Outside of school holidays is when some families need that support as well. And if you can use this money to keep families in their homes for longer, if you can use it to, as I said, help tackle social isolation, make it less of a sticking plaster and more of something that means families are less likely to need support in the future, that's what's going to help families build their own resilience and reduce demand for council services.
All right. Thank you, Deven. Thank you so much. Deven Ghelani is founder of the Policy in Practice consultancy.